Hello and welcome to the Democracy Center. At this center you're going to learn about what a direct and a representative democracy are. You're also going to learn about some of the similarities and differences between the ancient Athenian democracy and that of the United States democracy. As we're filling in our notes, you're going to come across blank lines. The blue highlights within this presentation will be what you need to fill in there. So first we'll start by looking at the two types of democracy. The first type is direct democracy, which is where the people vote directly on all laws and policies. This is what we see in Athens, where all the citizens are involved in the lawmaking process. Now, the second type of democracy that we see is a representative democracy. And people vote for representatives, and then it's those representatives' job to vote on the laws and policies. And this is what we are probably much more familiar with, what we see here in the United States. Remember that at any time, if you need to pause or rewind this video, you are welcome to. Now, Athens, let's go back in time, created a democracy. And what is that direct democracy? It's direct rule by the people. The citizens would propose the laws that they wanted to put into place. The council members, or the people who decide on laws, would be chosen at random. But one big issue we had with the direct democracy was that it was difficult to use in a large society because there was just too many people trying to get everyone's vote, everyone's opinion heard. It was very difficult. We have the father of democracy is known as Phinices, and in around 500 BC, he taught the concept, or he came up with the concept of democracy and introduced it to Athens. He supported the overthrow of the previous aristocratic government in Athens, and he wanted to try this concept of democracy. Now, in Athens, who was a citizen? A citizen was a free, male, white man, individual who owned land. Women, slaves, and foreigners weren't considered citizens, as we've already learned. So that meant that the only person who had a say in the government were those free white males. Now, what was their role in government? All citizens had the right to speak their mind. You could see up to 6,000 citizens that would be voting and speaking on an issue. All citizens could vote by a show of hands, stones, or pottery, kind of depending on what the vote, what they were doing. Sometimes they would throw all the stones in one box or the other, kind of the idea of where we get the ballot box in voting today. Citizens served on large juries to decide court cases. Hundreds of people could sit on a jury. Now today, our juries are much smaller. If you guys have ever seen Law and Order, you'll see, they have just a jury of about 9 to 13. But this is an idea that you are being judged by your peers. If you're being accused of a crime, that people of your equal value should be the ones deciding whether you are innocent or guilty, which was definitely something that they hadn't experienced before in the different types of government when they had only 1 to 2 leaders, is if they found you guilty, you were guilty. Here, you were judged by your peers. So the government under Phinices. Now the Greeks had a constitution of written laws. We also have an idea of a constitution in the United States, so we keep our written laws, which are our requirements of what to do as they run our country. Now, the government he established had a council of 500, and these people were not elected, but they were chosen at random to govern. So any citizen could be chosen within this council of 500. Now, they needed about 6,000 to actually vote on issues. They would come to the Agora, they would come to the Acropolis, and they would vote. Now, citizens were required to educate their sons as well under this government he had decided, because obviously we want educated people making the decisions. We also see that he made citizens take an oath of citizenship. Their goal was to make Athens a better place, to promise to be honorable in battle, to follow the Constitution, and respect religion. Now, we do see some similarities between the Athenian government and the U.S. governments. The citizens are able to exercise political power. That means the citizens can vote. we did see that power was divided between three branches. Now, executive, legislative, judicial, those are terms that we use here in the United States, but they had very similar branches that we're going to see on one of the following slides. So the executive branch, which you can see the Capitol building right there, are the ones who write the laws. The executive branch carries out the laws. That's like our president, and the judicial branch interprets the laws. They make sure that the laws follow the Constitution. We also see that within the judicial branch, you have the citizens are making decisions on trials as paid jurors. Like we mentioned in ancient Athens, we have that in the United States as well, where you might have heard your parents before talk about getting jury duty. So this is not a slide that appears on your notes, but I did want to see some of the similarities. We have our legislative, executive, and judicial branch, and they had very similar branches, obviously different names, but they divided the power up as well. Remember, the reason to divide up power is so that no one person becomes too powerful, and no one person has too much say in the government. Now, the ancient Athenians, as we mentioned, had limits on participation and who was a citizen. Slaves, foreigners, and women could not participate. Now, when the United States first began, we had a lot more limitations on who was allowed to vote as well. In the United States, we had slaves, and they did not have the right to vote. Women were not given full voting rights, and they even had to lower the voting age because it was higher. So today, any U.S. citizen over the age of 18 is allowed to vote. Okay. All right, some big differences, though, which we kind of already mentioned. The Athenian citizens are men only. Like we said, women were not allowed to participate in government back then. The Athenians' laws were proposed directly, that they were given to all of the population. Athenian leaders were chosen by lottery, so at random, if you're a citizen and participate in the government, you could be chosen to be a leader within the government. The Athenian executive branch is a council of selected citizens, so within the chosen leaders, they would choose a leader to lead the executive branch. And the Athenian judicial branch had no attorneys and no appeals. Now, very different from the United States, the U.S. citizens is anyone who's considered a citizen, women, men, any ethnicity is allowed as long as they were born in the United States or they've taken a citizenship test. In the United States, we have representatives who are elected to vote on laws. Different, like we said, Athens, those laws are proposed directly. So we have this idea of a representative government. The U.S. citizens vote for their leaders. The U.S. is made up of an elected president, so that means that the general population are deciding who the president is. But the president gets to appoint some of his officials. The U.S. has attorneys and a long appeals process. So if we're not happy with a court decision, you can appeal it and ask for another court case. Now, direct democracy versus representative. In ancient Athens, they had a legislative body of roughly 40,000 male citizens, and they were allowed to appear and participate. That's a lot of people competing for floor time to talk about their issues and ideas. In a representative democracy in the United States, we have 50 elected senators and 435 representatives that come from each of our states, not from 435 from each state. That's total, that are the ones making the decisions on the laws that are created in the United States. Like we said, in Athens they have a lottery, which means that people are chosen at random. The Council of 500 did not have elected leaders, that people who were in the Council of 500 were placed there randomly, and they all had equal power. The point of the lottery system was intended to prevent outside influence on potential political leaders. The United States, very different. We see that people are elected, that people can donate money in order to try and get their person elected. And the big election that we see usually is president. All right, so in conclusion, direct democracy in Athens greatly influenced the representative democracy of the United States. Given the power to vote to the citizens is something we saw in Athens, we see in the United States. Having a written constitution, dividing power up into 3 branches, the lawmaking branch, which is our legislative, the law enforcing branch, which is our executive, and the law interpreting branch, which is our judicial, and the idea of having citizens act as jurors during trials. So now that you've completed this, what you guys want to do is go to your notes and get these glued into your notebook. You want to glue down the yellow page first, and then the blue one you want to glue just at the top above this one. I would recommend gluing this yellow one down as low as it will go on the page, and the blue one up nice and high so we can do flip notes. You also are expected now to compare Athens and the United States democracy in this Venn diagram in order to complete this station.